Why hello there friends, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. Welcome to my 9th annual reading year in review. Today I'm going to be telling you the top 23 books that I read or reread throughout 2023. Next year will be the 10th year in a row that I do this list, this video. And I was thinking I should go back and rewatch all the past videos and maybe pick out my top reads of the decade. That would be a fun project. But for now, we'll stick with just 2023. I did want to mention over on my Substack, I'm going to be posting this video on both YouTube and Substack. And Substack, I can do like a little newsletter or blog to go with it. So I'm going to put my favorite quotations from each of these books over in the Substack post. Because if I tried to look up the quotations right now, it would take me a very, very long time to film this. And the light, these winter days, whenever I film this video, it's like, I guess I should have started filming at 10 in the morning because it's only like 2 or 3 o'clock right now and I've practically lost the light. Anyway, if you want to see the top quotations, make sure you hop over and check out the Substack. Possibly you're there already. So I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly so that this video does not get too long. But I feel like all of these books are things that I could just go on and on about. However, I probably already have gone on and on about them in my monthly reading wrap-ups that I post both on Substack and on YouTube. So if you want to hear more about any of these books, make sure you go and watch the past videos. I'm going to try to divide this up month by month, which I've never really done before, but I was realizing I think I have roughly 2 from each month. So we'll see if I can get it organized like that. I made myself a list in my little notebook back in January, and wrote out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all the way through 23. So it's been really fun to just slowly, one by one, decide as I've been reading. Some books I knew like as soon as I picked it up, or like at least halfway through. As I was going through, I knew it would go on the list. But other books, I was like, this could go on the list, but there were some things I didn't like about it. But one of the ways I decide is that it's the books that, like the quotations, honestly. I feel like when there are lines that stand out to me, and especially that linger in your memory, as you're moving forward, as months go by and it's been a couple months since you read the book, but you still remember little lines and little scenes and things from the book. So then that makes me realize, okay, that book did need to go on the list. I meant to stack these in the right order so it would be easy to get at them, but then I took the thumbnail picture and they got all out of order. So the beginning of the year got stuffed at the bottom of the pack. Okay, I guess I don't have to go in order, but see, I filmed a little B-roll of my cute calendar girl. I love those calendar girls that Disney animator, I can't remember her name right now, but she does them every year, and the dresses are just spectacular. I wish I could remake myself all of the dresses from the Calendar Girl set, especially this December one with the bow and arrow. But actually, this does lead us into our first pick, because the Calendar Girl this past year had a sort of astrology, a zodiac signs theme, a little bit of that going on. And this year I read The Valley of Song by Elizabeth Goudge. This was my first time reading this. It's one of Elizabeth Goudge's children's books. It's set in kind of the Regency time period in a port city where they make ships for the Royal Navy in England. And it is so delightfully magical. Speaking of zodiac signs and astrology, she weaves in the zodiacs as characters, as Christian symbols and Christian characters. And there is this magical world that the little girl Tabitha travels to, and some of the other characters make it to that world as well. The way Goudge deals with magic is so interesting, and in some books I feel like she does it better than others. In this book, I really loved it, and I thought there was so much spiritual symbolism, and some of the characters have some lessons that they need to learn, some difficulties that they need to face, and I absolutely love the way she handles it. See, right now I am really tempted to find you guys a quotation, but I'm saving that for the Substack so that we don't lose the light while we film this. I just think Elizabeth Goudge is hard to beat. I did just recently post my book club reading plans for a 2024 video, and there is an Elizabeth Goudge on that list, so I can't wait to read that and discuss it with you guys. I think I bought this book for my mom for Christmas, and then I think I promptly stole it. Actually, this is a problem with some of the books that I bought for my dad and my brothers. As I was wrapping them up, I was like, I wonder when they'll be finished reading this so that I can steal it back and read it myself. My mom really enjoys Beverly Nichols. His gardening books are thoroughly enjoyable. And when I discovered that he had written a cat book, obviously I had to check it out. I have a cat named Cymbeline. I've written a book books back there, about 3 books about Cymbeline actually. The newest Book of Cymbeline the Third, Beverly Nichols, gets a little hat tip or two in that. Cat's ABC is so wonderful. It's nonfiction, as the name suggests. It has a little sort of article about each letter. C is for cuisine. These delightful pen and ink sketches, really beautiful and striking. Here, what are some of the other letters? I'm forgetting. D is for dilapidations. Beverly Nichols' sense of humor is so wonderful. K is for kneading. There is also a Cat's XYZ, which I also got that for my mom and I, and we both read it and enjoyed it. I think ABC is maybe the better one. Just general, humorous, delightful cat observations. Must read for any Fs. And if you don't know what an F is, you'll have to read the book and find out. February takes us into Feb Regency territory. Feb Regency is a readathon I've co-hosted for the past 2 years. It runs throughout the month of February and celebrates writings from the Regency period in Great Britain. Of course, this is Jane Austen's period, but it's so much fun to delve into authors that she would have read, who would have influenced her. And one of those authors is Maria Edgeworth. She is so wonderful. This year I read The Absentee for the first time. Maria Edgeworth was an Anglo-Irish writer. So her family had lived in Ireland for several generations, but she wasn't a native Irish. She was one of the landed gentry who had British roots, because of course Britain and Ireland have a very tangled, long history. But she writes so well and so thoughtfully and compassionately about the Irish people, all of the unfair laws and ridiculous systems that Ireland had landed in because of this land ownership system and because there were so many absentee landlords. That is the inspiration behind the title, because the family in this novel are a family that, belongs in Ireland. They have estates in Ireland. That's how they make their money. But the wife, especially, really wants to make it big in England. She wants to compete with the British English aristocracy in London. So she pressures her husband and they set up shop in London. And of course, the actual British aristocracy look down on them because they're Irish. And it's just, there's so many tangled threads. But she did a really good job portraying all of them. And I think her writing style is amazing. It's no surprise that Jane Austen loved her so much. Maria Edgeworth is also on our book list for 2024. Belinda is what we're going to be reading next year, but I would highly recommend The Absentee. I have a couple of reads from Lent that made this list, and one of them was our Lenten read-along book, which is called The Cloud of Unknowing. It is by an anonymous author. This is a work of Christian mysticism written in the 14th century. We don't know who the author is, which I actually thought was very appropriate reading the book, because the whole thing is about unknowing. It is about how God is so far above us that to really, contemplate God, we kind of have to forget all of our earthly attachments, not just our attachments, but all of the earthly things we know. He talks so beautifully about that, deep, deep prayer and deep contemplation of God. But he also does it very sensitively, recognizing that, you really need to have normal prayer and you need to have an active life as a Christian as well. The fact that he didn't want his name attached to this work feels like he really practiced what he preached. I am planning a Lenten read-along with that same group of lovely booktubers in 2024. And actually, we're doing an Advent read-along right now, but I will mention that a little later in this list. Another thing I read during Lent this year was Paradise Regained, The Tradition and the Poem. This is by Elizabeth Marie Pope. As far as I know, and if anyone else knows otherwise, please tell me, but as far as I know, there are only 3 books by Elizabeth Marie Pope. She was actually, I believe, a university professor, and she wrote 2 kind of middle grade books, The Sherwood Ring and The Perilous Guard. The Perilous Guard won, was it the Newbery Medal? The Perilous Guard is fairly well known. Sherwood Ring, I'll talk to you about in just a second. But I love The Perilous Guard and The Sherwood Ring so much that I realized I need to get my hands on anything else by Elizabeth Marie Pope. And this is a very scholarly work, and it is all about Paradise Regained, Milton's classic, and it really puts it in the context of the time he was writing it. So it talks about other writers from the same time period, medieval writers that Milton would have been writing either contemporaneously with or writers who he would have been familiar with. I feel like Elizabeth Marie Pope's academic bent does come out in some interesting ways in The Sherwood Ring and The Perilous Guard. So it was really fun to see her in full-on academic scholarly mode. in this book. I did just reread Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained last year, so this was like the perfect way to follow it up. This, I'm fairly certain, was a middle grade March read. It was The Borrowers by Mary Norton. It's hard to believe that I didn't read this growing up, and yet I'm surprised that I don't remember it more because I love dollhouses and miniatures, and this is about a miniature world. It was adapted into an animated movie, the Arrietty movie, I believe. You know, growing up there was a series called The Littles where it was tiny people with tails, and I remember loving that, but I really loved this when I reread it during middle grade March this year. And just the description of the house and all of their, you know, contrivances and the things that they borrow and the history of the borrowers who used to live in this house and how they interacted with the family, and like the human family in the house has kind of changed. And so the borrowers also have had to adapt to that. And there just are some beautiful descriptions of, you know, what it would be like to be tiny. It really puts you into that mindset and makes you see the world in this magical new way. I did not know when I started reading it that it is a series. I did not get to the rest of the series this year, but I definitely want to get to that at some point. G.K. Chesterton is on the list this year. I read Man Alive for the first time. I enjoyed it so much. When G.K. Chesterton goes off into fiction, he can get really quirky. Like The Man Who Was Thursday, when I read that for the first time, I was like, this is a little too out there for me, a little too mystical. I don't know what's going on. But then I read The Poet and the Lunatics, and I really liked that. I do like the Father Brown mysteries. See, they're a little bit not mystical enough. We need something between Father Brown and The Man Who Was Thursday, and I feel like Man Alive definitely fits into that. Very funny, very, very thought-provoking, very meaningful. It definitely veers up towards Man Who Was Thursday in terms of like dancing on your cosmic awareness kind of symbolism and depth and meaning. But really, really enriching. So many beautiful passages. I have no idea how I'm going to pick just one in my blog post, but stay tuned to the Substack. We'll see if I manage to keep it to just one for Man Alive. I told you we'd come back around to the Sherwood Ring. Yes, I'm putting 2 Elizabeth Marie Popes on this list. I'm not even apologizing. And you know what? We're reading The Perilous Guard next year for my book club, so probably that will appear on the 2024 top reads. I personally like the Sherwood Ring better. It's set in the American Revolution. It's actually a frame story, so a lot of the action is set during the American Revolution, and then some of it is set like during the modern day age, which would have been like the 50s or 60s maybe. This was first published in 1958. So I really like the frame story. I feel like there are like some similarities because it's a modern day member of the family learning about her family history and how they were involved in the American Revolution. And there are some ghosts that she meets. I feel like calling them ghosts gives you the wrong idea of the story, because it's not at all like a ghost story. It's just so much fun. The characters are so delicious. We've got peaceable Sherwood, who gives me Smith vibes. The P is silent. P.G. Woodhouse's P. Smith, except as a British commander who is sort of gone rogue during the American Revolutionary War. Barbara Graham is also fantastic. Barbara and Peaceable are like one of my top couples, top tier romantic couples in literature. I don't know why I find their relationship really, really fun. If you haven't checked this one out yet, definitely put it on your list. Next up, we have A Willa Cather, Death Comes for the Archbishop. Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space did a great review of this, and it had been on my list to check out. We did do it as one of our book club reads this summer, and it was so good. It was such a fascinating setting because it's set in the Southwest in 1851. Father Jean-Marie Latour comes as the apostolic vicar to New Mexico. What he finds is a vast territory of red hills and tortuous arroyos, American by law but Mexican and Indian in custom and belief. In the almost 40 years that follow, Latour spreads his faith in the only way he knows, gently, although he must contend with an unforgiving landscape, derelict and sometimes openly rebellious priests, and his own loneliness. This does have a very long span because, as it says, it spans basically 40 years. In some ways, the chapters almost read as short stories, so if you wanted to kind of take your time and break it up like that, it would work well. But I loved getting to see so much of his tenure and so many different people and priests and communities that he gets to visit and interact with. And I believe that Willa Cather did a lot of research and that this is based on some actual priests. I know someone in our book club had been out to New Mexico and had kind of seen some of the things that were mentioned in the book, and so that was really exciting to hear about. My favorite Willa Cather is actually set in Quebec. It is called, oh my gosh, I am completely blanking. It has a pine cone on the cover. I'll put a picture of it in here, but I feel like I'm now adding Death Comes to the Archbishop as another Willa Cather favorite. Next is an Eva Ibbotson. It's Journey to the River Sea. This is a children's book. This, again, has a fabulous setting. It is set out on the Amazon River. The Amazon is the River Sea. It's such a huge river that they call it the River Sea. And her description of the landscape and the animals and the people is so well done. She also weaves in this sort of mystery, family mystery from an estate back in England. And that is really intriguing, but I have to admit, if there's one reason why this book is on the list, it is Miss Minton. She is the governess who arrives and is just so fabulous. She brings along this completely impractical but wonderful heavy trunk of books, and she has like a hat pin shaped like a sword, and she's just fabulous. You have to read the book to get to know Miss Minton. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning, but obviously these books are not books that came out in 2023. They're not even books that I necessarily read for the first time in 2023. They're just the 23 books that stood out the most. It should surprise no one to find a Jane Austen book on this list, and it is Sense and Sensibility. You know, every time I reread Jane Austen, something different stands out to me, and I just see it in a new light, and like it just sheds light on what's happening to me, and I feel like something I needed to know God put in that book through Jane Austen, and she's telling it to me when I need it, and I love it so much. And Sense and Sensibility definitely was that kind of book this summer. Spending time with Eleanor and Marianne and Colonel Brandon and Willoughby and Edward Ferrars and all of the rest of them was just absolutely delightful. I did read that during Jane Austen July. Also, was it July or August that we read for our book club? Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc by Mark Twain. I heard about this book a couple years ago, so fascinated, because Mark Twain, of course, not exactly like a faithful Christian. In fact, I don't think he was a believer at all, but he had this deep love and reverence for Joan of Arc, and he wrote this really incredible, very meticulously researched book about her, but there's also some elements of humor and buffoonery and like typical Mark Twain style stuff, and he merges the two in, I thought, such an interesting way. I found it to be a really interesting introduction to Joan of Arc. I didn't realize this, but apparently at the beginning of the 1900s, I believe, or late 1800s, around the time Mark Twain was living and writing, there was an account of Joan of Arc's trials that was kind of retranslated and republished, and it re-sparked this interest in her as a saint. And she actually wasn't canonized until the 1900s, although she lived, of course, in the 1400s was when Joan of Arc lived and died. But I found it to be really fascinating on two fronts, both just an insight into Mark Twain, but then also insight into Joan of Arc's life. I've been rereading Little House on the Prairie this year, so I had to put one of the Little House on the Prairie books on this list. I have been enjoying this reread so much. I feel like reading it as an adult, I hadn't read it in many years, just makes me like so thankful that I read it as a kid. I feel like it was formative in different ways, and like the mindset of Laura and her family. There's so much strength, so much resilience. Like they are so tough, just tough as nails. They do not give up. They definitely put you to shame because, you know, you think about all the modern conveniences and comforts that you have, and then you look at the Ingalls family and the things that they went through and the challenges that they faced and didn't give up. You know, they didn't let it hold them back or hold them down. And they continue to find joy and beauty and, you know, meaning in their family and love for each other. And I just feel like this is such a fantastic series. If you've never read it or if you haven't read it in a while, definitely pick it up again. Little Town on the Prairie was probably my favorite because Laura is growing up, and so she's starting to notice things more and, you know, realize things that ways her parents have sacrificed that she didn't even notice when she was younger. And it is fascinating to see this town growing up on the prairie. We do meet Almanzo. We actually met him for the first time in The Long Winter, I think. But we see him again in Little Town on the Prairie, and there's this one scene, I think it's the 4th of July, like celebration for the town, and they're doing a horse race, and everyone, all the men entering the race have tried to find the lightest buggy they could find because they don't want the horses to have to be pulling this heavy thing. And Almanzo has these incredible horses, but he's too proud to borrow a buggy. He's like, no, I'm gonna do this on my own steam. And he and his brother Royal just have this big feed wagon that's like super heavy. And everyone kind of laughs at him and is like, he's not gonna win. But then, well, read the book to find out. But Almanzo in that scene, I'm just like, oh, yes. Another children's series that I've been reading this year, this time for the first time, Little House on the Prairie was like, oh, my jam. That was one of my favorite series of books growing up. But I think I only read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I did not read the rest of the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know how that happened. Obviously, a mistake that needed to be rectified. I've been enjoying them so much. You get so much out of these as an adult. There's so many observations and, you know, reflections on faith and that are so beautiful. The Horse and His Boy has probably been my favorite so far. I just finished Dawn Treader. I loved Prince Caspian too. I wrote a Substack post on some of the quotes that inspired me from Caspian. But I loved the cat element in this. The cats are on the back. I love the illustrations in this collector's edition series. And yeah, I loved how this takes place almost during The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So you get to see Queen Lucy and Queen Susan. You get to see them when they're kings and queens of Narnia. They're not the main characters though, the Pevensies. We have Shasta and, oh, I can't remember her name. Anyway, absolutely love Chronicles of Narnia. This was one of the books that I was like, but I didn't love the book. I felt like it wasn't quite perfect. It was too long. It could have used an editor, but at the same time, it had so many beautiful passages and so many reflections on faith and so many lovely, lovely ideas that really stuck with me that, you know what, I have to put it here. It's Christy by Catherine Marshall. Kate Howe recommended this really highly, and I can definitely see why. It's about a school teacher in the early 1900s who leaves her comfortable home and goes to the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee to become a teacher and to try to, you know, educate these kind of backwoods, very insular, very tight communities who don't really trust anyone from the outside. But they gradually come to trust her, and she learns so much from them. She realizes, you know, I think she kind of goes in thinking, well, yeah, these people who live at the back of beyond and don't really know anything. But actually they have this beautiful heritage from Scotland, and like there's this sort of regalness about them. She does a good job looking at both the positives and the negatives. And the descriptions of the landscape are amazing, and her wrestling with faith is also beautiful. Like I said, not perfect, needed an editor, but the good in it definitely outweighs the bad. My two Victober reads both made the list. One of them was Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. We read this for my book club. I had read it before, but it had been a while. It was so much fun to discuss with you. Perfect vibes for Halloween. Definitely the spooky element and the picture that Dorian hides upstairs. That really makes this book, because Dorian's life and his philosophy, like, we get lots of appreciation of art and beauty and philosophy, but the picture upstairs is this like stark reality that you just cannot get around. And that contrast is so fascinating, and Oscar Wilde's writing is really spectacular, the way he deals with different ideas and describes different moments so well. The other Victober read on this list, this is one of the top. Like if I had to pick a top 5, this would totally be in the top 5. It was Pillars of the House by Charlotte Mary Young. This is the reason why Anna Karenina is not on this list, and I haven't even finished Anna Karenina yet, because Anna Karenina is really long, and like I've been plugging away. There are beautiful scenes. Hopefully I'll finish it. Maybe it'll make it onto the list next year. Anna herself just annoys me. I don't have much patience with her, and a lot of the book is about her, so that's a drawback. But the Pillars of the House characters, this book was about as long as Anna Karenina, and I like flew through it so fast. I didn't want to put it down. It is cozy, but it has depth, beautiful spiritual reflections, so many characters in the same family too. It's a family of 13 orphans. It's hard to tell who's who at first, because like everyone has a nickname, but it's just so believable, so relatable, so real. It's set, of course, during the Victorian time period, but it just feels like they're people you know. They're just like the people you meet. And the things that Charlotte Mary Young notices are like the things that I love to notice. Just the little tiny things that, you know, give you joy, or like that are just funny or silly or interesting or intriguing. And she's so well read. Charlotte Mary Young is like constantly dropping allusions, and I'm always trying to highlight them and look them up, because it's like she's casually quoting St. Francis de Sales in the original French. But she's not at all pedantic. She's not at all preachy, especially in the way she talks about faith. It's really just so authentic. I am 100% on the Charlotte Mary Young hype train. My mom has read The Daisy Chain and The Long Vacation and is like loving them so much, so I need to sit down and get to those as well. But yes, Charlotte Mary Young 100% needs to make a comeback. I heard about her from Kate Howe. I'm just so 100% on board the hype train. We need to make the Charlotte Mary Young comeback happen. We had C.S. Lewis on this list. I also have J.R.R. Tolkien on this list. I read Tree and Leaf in November. This was so wonderful. I'd read parts of it before, like Leaf by Nigel and also Mythopoeia. Every time I reread Mythopoeia, I just fall in love with it all over again. This philosophy of subcreation and how creative life ties into your faith in God, and it's just so beautifully expressed. But I'd never read the essay, which is called Tree and Leaf, and it's very much in the same theme. It deals a lot with storytelling, very specifically with fairy tales, and what is a fairy tale, and why is a fairy tale so powerful, and why is a fairy tale not just for kids, and so many different things from that I absolutely loved. But yeah, this is another book that if I had to like do just a top 5 out of this 23, this would 100% be on the list. I have no idea how I'm going to pick out a quotation for it. I'm not entirely finished with this book yet, but I'm sure I will finish it before the end of the year. And I bought it this year, and I just felt like it belongs on this list. This is Nordic Tales, folk tales from Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, and Denmark, illustrated by Ulla Thinnell. It's by Chronicle Books. They actually do a whole series of these. They have like Celtic tales, Indian tales. I totally want to collect them all now, but I've been absolutely loving this, and this was the perfect book to read right after Tree and Leaf, because here I had Tolkien telling me like this is what matters in a fairy tale, like that catastrophic turn, I think he calls it. And so to then pick up the fairy tales, and he himself loved Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, those were hugely influential in Lord of the Rings. To pick this up right after Tree and Leaf has been so enriching. It has beautiful illustration. My favorite one so far has been East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Absolutely love that one. Last year I put the Book of Cymbeline on my top reads of 2022 list because the first installment in the series came out in September of 2022. I had 2 new installments of the series that came out this year. The Book of Cymbeline the second came out earlier in the year. This takes us from fall to winter, so it does have Christmas and Halloween and Thanksgiving and lots of fun things. But this third installment just came out in November, and this is the one that gets the spot on the list, the Book of Cymbeline the third, Kittens Tale from Winter to Spring. I'm just so proud of how this came out. It's been really exciting to chase this idea down. You know, I feel like I always have these ideas that it's like, oh, I should write a book about it. But it's been really rewarding to sit down and like hammer it out, you know, wrestle it into existence. I did do the illustrations in this book myself, and it's available on Amazon as an ebook or paperback. If you have not yet gone and checked it out, you should definitely go grab yourself a copy. 2024. We're gonna have the Book of Cymbeline the 4th. There's gonna be definitely at least one more, probably just one more in the series, and then I'll kind of reevaluate and see if there's another project I wanna chase down next. This is always the part of the list where I'm like, did I forget one? Have I already given 24 picks or 23? I think that we have just 2 more. They're the 2 December picks. We're finally coming back around to that Advent read-along this year. I've been reading He That Should Come by Dorothy Sayers. This is a religious play set during the Nativity, and it takes such an interesting look at the birth of Christ because, you know, we all know the story. He was born in a crowded stable and a crowded inn. Bethlehem was very, very crowded, and there was no room, so they stayed in this stable. And Dorothy Sayers takes us into the inn, the crowded inn, and like kind of keeps the focus on the people in the inn. And the nativity almost takes place off stage, but it's just so full of meaning and so beautiful the way she unfolds it, because the people in the inn are talking about the prophecy of the Messiah and what will it be like when he comes, how will it be, and of course it's happening right there, right in front of them. And the couple of times we do get to see Mary and Joseph, it's so beautiful. I love how, you know, when they come in, they're just like any other couple who's expecting, like they're just, you know, another guest. But then later on, when they're talking to Joseph and asking him about the baby, he tells them this is a child sent by God. The angel told us to name him Jesus. And it starts with a little look at the 3 kings, and that is very beautifully written, kind of philosophical. And Dorothy Sayers just was so smart and writes so beautifully. She translated Dante's Divine Comedy. I would highly recommend that translation. She also is most well known for the Lord Peter mysteries. Those are really delightful. If you haven't checked out her religious plays, you must definitely check them out. We are planning on doing a live stream over on Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space over on her channel to kind of wrap up our Advent read-along. And that will be December 30th at, I think it's 1 p.m. Pacific time. December 30th. I'll link the live stream down below. But if you're interested in hearing more about the play, definitely go pop in for that. Last but not least, I had to put A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens on this list. I don't know how I got this far along in my life and never read it. Like, I've seen the movies, you know, I know the story, and yet I never sat down with the book. It's so good. There are so many different things that you can kind of trace how things inspired things in the movie, but the writing is so beautiful, so funny, so insightful. One scene that really stuck out to me though, and it's funny because you rarely see this in the movies. I guess it wouldn't really fit in the Scrooge McDuck adaptation, but Christmas Present, at the end of his journey with Scrooge, he's kind of dying and these two children pop up and he explains to Scrooge that they are ignorance and want, and they're kind of the two worst plights of humanity, but of the two, ignorance is worse than want. And he says something along the lines of, woe to those who leave people in ignorance and then manipulate them for their own gain. And I just thought that was so powerful and just, you know, it made me think of so many things in today's world. But you know what? That is why I love to read classics so much, because I feel like classics don't let you remain in ignorance. They shine the light on the things that you need to know, and just reading them makes you think more broadly in your own life, in your own day-to-day, in today, because these truths about humanity carry through. Thank you all so much for watching. I'd love to hear about what books you have read in 2023 that have really stayed with you or provoked different thoughts. I wish you all a very merry and blessed Christmas and a very happy New Year. I'll talk to you again soon, and until then, stay bookish. Bye, friends.